Hello everyone and welcome back to the Football Insider channel. Today we are talking about Graham Potter in his future at West Ham. So please let me know in the comments what you think of Graham Potter and his time at West Ham so far. Please like and subscribe to the video, and if you enjoy it, let's dive into the story. So Football Insider can reveal that Graham Potter is fighting for his job at West Ham and he has potentially 4 games, yes, just 4, to save himself from the chop. Peter O'Rourke revealed on the latest edition of Football Insider's Inside Track podcast that the upcoming run of games against Palace, Everton, Arsenal and Brentford will be crucial in determining Potter's future at the club. And if the Hammers show no signs of improvement, then it could well mean the end of Potter's pretty middling run as West Ham boss. So to go through the main talking points of what O'Rourke said, it was that Potter still has the backing of the board right now, in spite of their recent statement where they said that, things haven't been good enough so far this season. There's protests coming up this weekend for the Crystal Palace game, which are obviously going to add to the negative feeling around the football club, and his home record at West Ham has been pretty poor since he's came in. In fact, his overall record at West Ham has not been the best since he took the job earlier this year. So what does all this mean? Well, you look at West Ham this season. They've started the season in pretty poor form. They lost 3-0, of course, on the opening day against Sunderland, a newly promoted team. They followed it with a hammering against Chelsea at home in the London derby. They did pick up that 3-0 win at Nottingham Forest, which maybe give everyone a slight bit of, maybe false hope that things could be better for them. But then they lost last weekend pretty embarrassingly against Tottenham 3-0. So overall, so far, it feels like West Ham have really not got going so far this season. Yes, there is that Nottingham Forest game, but there's context around that. The situation at Nottingham Forest with their manager, obviously that was Nuno's last game before he was given the sack. So maybe all, things went well there. It was a sort of tight game where West Ham sort of got away with it towards the end of the game and won it 3-0. And they weren't able to follow that up. And it's been a continuing theme, not just Graham Potter's run at West Ham, but West Ham in recent years, that they concede goals in bunches. And Potter has not been able to address that. And they don't look any better than what they were, 12 months ago, where under Julian Lopetegui, they were also struggling. So will he survive? And I think that the feeling probably now amongst fans is, when will this happen? Not if. It feels like Potter and West Ham hasn't been a happy marriage for a long time. It's just a case of can he prolong that, give himself a stay of execution if they pick up some results. But it feels like the issues at West Ham go far beyond the manager. And I think it would be very disingenuous just to sit here and pin all this on Graham Potter and this current group of players, because there are issues at that club right now. The fans, of course, are not very happy with how things are going. They're not happy with the direction of the club. They don't like the stadium. They don't really like the ownership. So that is all added together to become a recipe for disaster. And a lot of those issues with the ownership and the stadium were sort of covered over with the success that they had, under David Moyes. But now that era where they won, obviously, the Europa Conference League and they were competing in the Europa League, that era has passed. And right now, West Ham fans are looking at this going, do you know what? There's not a lot to love about this football club right now. And Graham Potter is the figurehead. That's the easiest person to target. But fundamentally, if West Ham were to sack Graham Potter tomorrow and bring in a Nuno Espirito Santo or a Sean Dyche, they could get short-term relief. There is no doubt that those managers would, give them a great chance of staying up and doing more than that this season. But long-term, that isn't really an answer for where West Ham want to be. And I think that is the conundrum with the club and the fans right now is, yes, a change may be needed, but are they just prolonging the inevitable by not really addressing the core issues at West Ham right now? But that being said, Graham Potter, you can look at him, look at his record, look at what he has done in the game of football. You can see the positives there, but you can also see the negatives. And I think West Ham fans will look at him and go, well, even if everything is true around the ownership, the stadium, the issues around recruitment. God, we haven't even talked about recruitment and how bad that's been the last few years. Even if all those issues are correct, that doesn't mean that Graham Potter isn't blameless. And I think Graham Potter has to take, shoulder a lot of the blame this season. That move to playing 3 at the back from the start of the season, it basically cost them a winnable game against Sunderland on the opening day, because I would attribute that system being the key reason why West Ham were beaten in that game, because it just didn't really work from minute one. And it's difficult to see, Graham Potter having enough in him to get this pretty strong group of West Ham players. I mean, that's what they are, but to get them consistently picking up points in the Premier League. And with the newly promoted teams like Sunderland, like Leeds, like Burnley coming up and looking stronger than what we've seen in previous years, that puts the pressure on. If West Ham are just the same pretty much as they were last season, getting in the late 30s in terms of the points total, there is a good chance this season that the newly promoted teams are going to be in and around that points total, and that means West Ham are going to be in relegation trouble, which for a club that has got the budgets that they've got and has spent the money that they have, has the stadium that they've got, clearly relegation is not an option. And what would relegation even mean? What would it do to that football club? We don't know. But that feels like the issue right now with all of this. If West Ham were to get dragged into a fight, were potentially to get relegated, then all these problems are going to be exacerbated even more. And it feels like right now we're at the calm. We're probably not even at the calm. We are entering the storm for that. And without picking up positive results on the pitch, that situation is only going to worsen as time goes on. But two things are true. I think Potter is flawed as West Ham manager. That has not been a good marriage. It's not a good fit. But the ownership, the recruitment, and all the other things happening on and off the field, they are contributing to this problem. And sacking Graham Potter and putting somebody else there is not going to fix this problem. And I think that is why West Ham fans are so angry right now, because they can see that maybe not this season, maybe not the season after, but they can see that this club is heading in this direction under this current ownership and with everything they've done in terms of recruitment. And that is why they are protesting this weekend. So what is my verdict? Well, it is no shock that Graham Potter is on the chopping block. It's no shock that he is under pressure. And a poor defeat against Crystal Palace this weekend, I mean, I'm talking about maybe taking a 2 or 3-0 defeat. That could potentially end his reign, because the toxicity at that club right now is what it is. It's so much that can he come back from another heavy London derby defeat? And I don't know if he necessarily can. I think the club are clearly hoping that they can see some positive signs this weekend, coming up at home against a side that's obviously of weaker quality than Tottenham and Chelsea. But if that doesn't come, then alarm bells will be ringing. However, the club, they are the ones that shoulder this blame for me. They need to freshen itself up from top to bottom. I think, West Ham could really do with some, new ownership, new investment in there. They need to freshen up that squad. They need to start getting their recruitment right. There are so many things that club needs to get right, that just pointing at Graham Potter and saying that needs to change is not really an answer. It is not a long-term answer. It may give you short-term relief, but it won't give you long-term relief. So let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you think Graham Potter has been given a fair crack at West Ham, whether or not he should have even taken this job in the first place, and whether West Ham can actually stay up this season. Opta has them at a 36% chance of relegation, which is obviously pretty high for a team like West Ham in their budgets. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this content as well. And we'll be back over the weekend, no doubt, to talk about all the Premier League happenings. We'll see you soon.